Every once in a while, a game will come along that seems to defy the laws of space and time. Not just in that Kerbal Space Program, objects spinning into the sun at 1 trillion miles an hour way either. I'm talking about the kind of game which you can begin playing at 7 PM, then check the clock an hour later to find that you're already 3 days into next week. The kind of game that seems to grow 10 times in size every time you say, just one more go. And for that matter, the kind of game where just one more go is never just one more go. Repeat offenders include games like The Binding of Isaac and Spelunky, roguelites. Games that are simple enough that you can see the cause and effect of their interactions, deep enough that you need a wiki tab open just to stay afloat, and wide enough that every playthrough offers something just a little bit different. Kingsway, a quirky click-em-up released last year, is my latest encounter with this time-sync tradition, and like FTL and Isaac before it, is inexplicably expanding before my very eyes. If you were to spend 5 minutes with Kingsway's Steam Store page, assuming, of course, that you could still find real games on Steam Store, you'd be forgiven for assuming that it was just another droplet in a sea of fly-by-night gimmick games. Framed as an RPG, as told by Windows 95, its presentation is so outlandish that it's hard to imagine that it could work as anything other than a cheap joke. In Kingsway, you create a character straight out of the lineup of Guess Who, and are dropped onto a 20th century desktop, complete with big blocky windows and a colour palette smaller than your phone's passcode. Get used to it, because this is where the entire game takes place. The entire game is told diegetically. Your character's place in the RPG world is depicted in one program, your character in another, while inventory management is handled entirely by the fake computer's folder structure. Enemies take the form of pop-ups, while looting them is essentially a case of dragging goodies into my documents. The entire thing is twee and authentic in a way that a lot of gimmick games aren't, and this is the first indication that there's a lot lurking under the surface with this one. There are the little touches, like the fake BIOS screen that starts the game, or the fake media player that provides the game's music, that really ground the game in a believable space, and that substantiates its quirkiness as something more than a gimmick. It helps that the game's meta elements have cleverly been made part of its challenge. On top of the game's more traditional combat system, in which you and the enemy take turns swiping at each other's ghoulies until one of you keels over, you're also fighting a constant battle against your interface. Keeping on top of multiple folders worth of items can be taxing, and certain enemies and encounters are designed to obscure vital parts of the screen, to throw new windows at you like QuickTime events, or to close vital parts of your desktop display entirely. This is a game that perfectly captures the despair of browsing TV tropes at 3 in the morning, when the tabs just won't stop opening, but you're really not sure what to do with them. The best part is that it never gets too annoying, just because it adds a skill-based challenge to aspects of RPGs that are traditionally underbaked or maligned. Nobody likes inventory management, but turning it into a skill-based exercise in mid-battle plate juggling at least brings a bit of interest to it. So yeah, Kingsway is quirky, but crucially, beneath all of its quirks, Kingsway is built on a steady foundation of time-tested RPG fare. You saunter around a large open world, killing the unscrupulous and the unkind. You level up, you sink all of your points into strength, sink some more points into strength, and then wonder why you died an hour later when all 10 of your maximum hit points get swiped in one hit. It's fun, it's familiar, and the Windows 95 aesthetic lends it a novelty that keeps you interested for those initial few hours while you dig around in the guts of the mechanics and work out just how deep it all goes. Video gaming is full of time wasters. In a post-lootbox world especially, you'd be hard-pressed to find a game that expects anything less than 20 hours from you, let alone one that doesn't ask for your credit card details and national insurance number for the privilege. Games like Kingsway, though, steal your time in a very specific way. These games don't cynically grab your attention with Emperor's New Clothes social hooks, or keep you running laps towards ever-distant goals to keep you on board. As a matter of fact, most would probably risk turning an EA stockholder's face blue in daring to show you a credit screen after just 1 hour. Instead, these games foster an environment in which you're encouraged to discover, to rediscover and master the game, and in which increasing degrees of mastery only open up the game more. There's a Groundhog Day cycle to a lot of these games. In a roguelite like FTL, for example, playthroughs are short and are usually defined by their randomly generated elements. The joy of playing these games comes from the way in which the need to adapt to randomization forces you to dig deep into a game's mechanics, and the often short length ensures that you're discovering new things all the time, which you're then taking forward into future runs, and using to discover even more things. There's a labyrinthine structure to these games, but it's a structure nonetheless, one that intuitively guides a player towards a full understanding of a game's mechanics over time, often without them realizing it. It's a slow burn, iterative path towards mastery, and seeing this process unfold is rewarding unto itself. In Kingsway in particular, most of the discovery comes from the character you play and the items you find. Different character classes have access to different skills and stats, some of which are standard RPG fare, and others are more creative and outlandish, and the slot machine-like spinning of these two elements can lead to some freakish scenarios. Whether you're casting from hit points to decimate hell beasts, banking on a steady stream of critical hits to find your way, or fully embracing that weirdo lifestyle and stooping down in a dark corner to chow down on the remains of your enemies, Kingsway's skill system succeeds at bringing something just a little bit different every time you play. Whenever you adapt and succeed on a given run, you're discovering something new about the game, and there's a real sense of reward to learning a game this deeply, gratifyingly demonstrated whenever you manage to destroy a once difficult boss in a new way. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's easy to like Kingsway, and thanks to its one more go, space-time break-in, I just sold my best weapon to a witch because I clicked on the wrong thing kind of structure, it keeps giving you reasons to like it. It's always refreshing to come across a game that doesn't ask for a lot of your time, but takes it anyway. There's a lineage here, right back to the days of the NES through to Dark Souls, of games that make the process of mastery the whole point. I think it's fitting that Kingsway should take place in a cute old operating system, considering the extent to which it mirrors the no-frills-attached dopamine rush experience of playing a lot of older video games. That's what makes Kingsway and games like it so appealing. Like its peers, the Spelunkis and the nuclear thrones of the world, it reframes the familiar in such a pretty frame that you can't help but mistake it for something new. I do have my quibbles. When it comes to pacing, in particular, Kingsway is situated in an awkward middle space, not quite as short as a Spelunky, an Isaac, or any of the classics of yore, but also not the slow-release kiss-your-life-goodbye length of an honorary time-sink game like Civilization or a game of Monopoly with your grandmother. I think Kingsway suffers because it isn't exactly quick-fire, even shorter runs take upwards of an hour, but it isn't exactly long enough to build deep connections with your characters in either. Whether that'll be enough to stop me, personally, from coming back to it eventually, remains to be seen. In the wider milieu of time-sink video games though, I have no doubt that Kingsway comfortably mingles with the best. When it comes to drawing you in and making you want to spend time in its world, there are few games better than this. And failing that, it's great even if just for the quality of its random name generator.